Today, we're going to cover 3 stories about a few of the world's youngest serial killers. Buckle up, because these shockingly true stories are bound to give you nightmares. Now, let's get into it. In Broward County, Florida, on January 30th, 1988, Lionel Alexander Tate was born. In 2001, 14-year-old Lionel was found guilty of killing 6-year-old Tiffany Unick and was given a life sentence without the chance of parole. On July 28, 1999, Kathleen Grosset Tate, the mother of Lionel, was asked to monitor Tiffany for the evening. When Tiffany Unick's breathing stopped at around 10:40 p.m., Lionel ran upstairs to get his mother and informed her of the situation. Lionel measured 170 pounds and asserts that he was merely engaging in an arm-to-arm combat with a 48-pound Tiffany just before she stopped breathing. The next thing he said was that she was crying, rolling around on the floor, acting like a baby, and peeing in her pants. He made the choice to resume watching TV. The most significant information in this passage is that Lionel Tate had a troubled past, which included 15 suspensions from school and other behavioral issues like stealing, lying, and fighting. The little girl's damaged body was already cold when Lionel eventually went to get his mother to inform her that she was not breathing. Experts claim that Tiffany suffered 35 injuries as a result of severe beating. Later, a child abuse specialist would testify that the intensity of this brutal assault, which lasted for almost 5 minutes, was comparable to falling from a 3-story building. Lionel Tate had a troubled past, having been expelled from school 15 times and engaging in other problematic behaviors like stealing, lying, and fighting. Does his mother share some of the culpability that she disregarded her son's earlier behavior and left him alone with a 6-year-old child? Lionel Tate was put on trial in 2001 for the murder of Tiffany Unick. He was given a plea deal by the prosecution to admit guilt to a lesser charge of second-degree murder, which carried a 3-year jail sentence and a 10-year probationary period. Tate and his mother, Kathleen, declined the offer and opted to enter a plea of not guilty to first-degree murder in the hopes of being exonerated. First-degree felony murder, which carries a mandatory penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole, was found guilty by the jury, and their verdict was returned. Following this conviction, a lot of individuals took up the cause for Lionel, calling for leniency in the punishment process. Due to the lack of mental competency hearing before his trial, an appeals court overturned his conviction in 2003. The state decided not to retry Tate after he entered a plea of guilty to second-degree murder. He was given credit for the 3 years he had already spent in juvenile detention center. He was also sentenced to a year of house arrest, 10 years of probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and a number of other requirements. In connection with the hold-up robbery of a pizza delivery man at gunpoint, Lionel Tate was charged in May 2005 with armed robbery, armed burglary with violence, and parole violation. He told the judge that he was hearing voices and that he intended to end his life. The judge judged him competent to stand trial. He admitted to having a gun in May 2006 and received a 30-year prison term. He was given a 10-year term after entering a no-contest plea to the robbery allegation in February 2008. Later, Tate defended his innocence in the pizza robbery case, suggesting that another individual might have been responsible for the crime. Tate's account was supported by a private investigator who offered a credible and convincing counter-argument to the heist based on DNA tests, the victim's testimony, and other data. Sadly, this line of defense appears to have dried up around 2007. Josh Phillips was born on March 17, 1984, to Steve and Melissa Phillips in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Both Melissa and his son Steve, who was a drug dealer and alcoholic, claimed to have lived in fear of him and described him as violent. Josh was eventually split from his half-brothers Daniel and Benji after Steve made the decision to move the family to Florida. Josh was 14 years old and residing in Jacksonville, Florida, with his family in November 1998. He was quiet and friendly, according to his neighbors, and his teacher at school stated he was a well-liked pupil. Josh accidentally hit Maddie Clifton's eye with a ball on November 3, 1998, causing her to bleed, scream, and weep. He took her inside his house in a fit of rage, struck her with a baseball bat, and then placed her under the foot of his bed. Phillips spent some time interacting with Steve when he got home before going back to his room. He took out the mattress, slit Clifton's throat, and then stabbed her 7 times in the chest when he realized she was still alive and wailing under his bed. Around 5 p.m. that day, Clifton's disappearance was reported, and for the next 6 days, police and volunteers looked for her. When Melissa Phillips entered her son Clifton's room on November 10th, she discovered his body. Within hours after being detained, she confessed to the crime. Some of Phillips's claims were challenged by the prosecution, which raised the possibility that the murder may have had a sexual motive. Although prosecutors maintained that the absence of sand and grime on Clifton's body did not support Phillips's claim that her clothes fell off as he carried her into his room, the autopsy found no indication of sexual assault. The fact that there was no blood in the backyard or the baseball that Phillips claimed struck Clifton was also mentioned by the prosecution. Due to worries about publicity in Jacksonville, the trial of Richard D. Nicholas, the attorney for Steve Phillips, was transferred from Duval County, Florida, to Polk County. The prosecution later referred to Nicholas's decision to not call any witnesses as an unexpected and hazardous tactic. In his closing statement to the jury, Nicholas argued that Clifton's death was an act that began as an accident and deteriorated through panic that bordered on madness. This statement served as the foundation for most of the defense. Melissa Phillips objected to Nicholas's plan, but Steve insisted on allowing the attorney to pursue this course of action. Phillips's parents were advised against allowing him to testify by Nicholas. Due to the defense's failure to call any witnesses, the trial, which began on July 6, 1999, was expectedly short-lived. It only lasted 2 days. The jury found Phillips guilty of first-degree murder in just over 2 hours. He was subsequently given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Due to his age of less than 16, he was not eligible for the death penalty. While the prosecution wanted to talk about proof, Phillips had viewed pornography on his computer. The defense tried to bring scans from a neurologist indicating bilateral lesions on the frontal lobe of Phillips's brain. The judge, however, determined that neither piece of evidence was admissible. In addition to working as a paralegal and tutor, Phillips earned his general education development while incarcerated. Along with participating in Christian religious services, zazen, and yoga, he also played guitar in a band. The prosecution conceded that Phillips had been a model prisoner during his 2017 appeal. As of 2008, Phillips refused to send a letter of apology to Clifton's family on the grounds that they should have received an apology directly from him. Phillips has been detained at the Taylor Annex as of 2021. Steve Phillips perished in an automobile accident on June 27, 2000. The 2nd District Court of Appeal for Florida upheld Clifton Phillips' conviction in 2002. Melissa Phillips requested a new trial in 2004, and the Florida Supreme Court scheduled a hearing for 2005. In 2008, 2 authorities acknowledged having second thoughts about sentencing a 14-year-old to life in prison without the possibility of release. Juvenile life sentences without the possibility of parole were declared unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2012. Phillips was resentenced to life in prison in 2017, but he can be tried again in 2023. The life sentence was upheld by Florida 1st District Court of Appeal in 2019, but Phillips appealed to the Florida Supreme Court, which declined to consider the case. Price picked up a juvenile criminal record as a kid and an adolescent that included offenses including breaking and entering, robbery, stalking, drug usage, and assault, oftentimes with his own family members. He eventually joined a group of other young offenders and began breaking into homes with them. Price was seen as a cheerful and energetic child in the neighborhood, despite his illicit activities. At the age of 13, Price claimed his first victim on July 27, 1987. He broke into Rebecca Spencer's home late at night, grabbed a 27-year-old neighbor's packing knife from her kitchen, and viciously stabbed her 58 times. Even though everyone in the neighborhood was horrified by how terrible the murder was, Rebecca's case was never solved. 2 years later, while under the influence of LSD, Price once again broke into the Heaton family's home in his neighborhood with the express purpose of looting it. He entered, and when he came across the mother, Joan, he panicked and assaulted and strangled her. Her little children, Jennifer and Melissa, were awakened by her screams. He grabbed a knife from the kitchen, just like last time, and stabbed the family's 3 members. He also bit one of the girls and Joan, and he hit Melissa in the head with a kitchen stool. Price sliced his hand while murdering the family. Later, because of the similarities between the Heaton family murder and Rebecca's murder, the FBI was called in to look into the killings and connect them to a serial killer. Given the proximity of the two crime scenes and the fact that the assailant cut his hand when stabbing the Heatons, the investigators concluded that the murderer was a local resident of the area. When Price was being questioned by two police detectives on September 5, 1989, they saw a cut on his hand, which Price attempted to explain away as a separate injury sustained while intoxicated. Following the failure of a lie detector test, a search warrant was issued, and the police discovered bloody knives and clothing inside his home. When questioned further about the killings, he promptly and without regret admitted to the atrocities, even imitating the girl's last sounds. Price was too old to stand for trial or go to jail, as required by Rhode Island law. He was thus transferred to the Rhode Island Training School, a juvenile detention facility. He was transferred to the Youth Correctional Center, the institution's maximum security section, where he would spend the next 5 years until his 21st birthday. The families of the victims and the people of Rhode Island were incensed by this truth. Price denied both treatment and questions regarding the killings while he was there, claiming that doing so would prolong his institutionalization. He usually acted appropriately while incarcerated, where he passed his high school equivalency exam and participated in satellite college classes. According to reports, the prison's administration recognized Price for his excellent behavior by granting him permission to offer advice to other inmates and carry out small security tasks. These cases are not only the horrifying cases of child psychopath killers in the world. In fact, these cases are barely scratching the surface. Keep your eyes peeled for the next video, stay tuned, and remember, trust no one.